Hello, all. Today I'm going to review another movie that I recently saw that I'd heard about for a long time but was never able to find. And I finally got a chance to see it. Purportedly, it's supposed to be like a really grade Z, horrible, very badly made science fiction movie, and it's called The Terrornauts, which is an interesting title that really has very little to do with anything that happens in the movie. It's from 1967 from Amicus Films, which was kind of a poor stepchild to Hammer. They produced similar, horror films and, lesbian vampire movies and things like that. But they also did some science fiction movies, and this is one of them. It stars Simon Oates, Zena Marshall, Charles Hawtrey, who people may know from the Carry On films. He always has these like little, John Lennon kind of glasses, and he's a very funny, short little guy, really a funny comedian. And Patricia Hayes, who also plays a very funny character, is a tea lady, and Stanley, Meadows, and Adrian. And it was written, this shocked me, it was written by John Brunner, the science fiction writer, one of my favorite science fiction writers, from a story by one of my other favorites, Murray Leinster, which was called The Whispering Asteroid, directed by a guy named Montgomery Tully. And it's the story of a group of scientists who are basically sort of an early SETI. They call themselves Project Star Talk. They are always borrowing time on a radio telescope, and the operators of the telescope aren't happy because they're not producing any results, and they're taking up time from what they consider serious radio astronomy. They're looking for signals on the neutral hydrogen band, which is 21 centimeters. That's real. That's real science, and that is, in fact, the frequency that SETI uses to look for intelligent life, because it's the most logical place that if someone had radio technology, that is where they would most likely send a signal on that wave band, because hydrogen is obviously the most abundant element in the universe. It makes sense that they would use it as a transmission medium. They find a signal coming from, they're about to be canceled. They're told by the head of this society, which I think is the guy played by Max Adrian, that you guys are wasting too much time. We're gonna complain to the higher ups. We're gonna have you guys shut down. You're taking up, you're not producing any results, and you're all going to be fired. And so they're all preparing to basically get the chop when alien radio signal does come in. They can't quite pinpoint it at first. They ask the telescope to, figure out where in the sky it's coming from. At first, they think it's just a satellite, but it's not, and they have it confirmed by an outside different radio telescope, which again is correct procedure that they would use. I think they got it confirmed by Jodrell Bank in England, and they come back and say yes, we're receiving it too. So it's real, and they locate it. It's somewhere in the asteroid belt on a known asteroid that they've heard about called something like K555. And these scientists decide they want to send, they say, like, what are we going to do now? This is 1967. They didn't have, spacecraft. So they're going to send a signal back, but they're going to have to requisition some very fancy equipment to do that. And that's where Charles Hawtrey comes in. He is hired by the unseen Mr. Holmes, who is the benefactor of these people, to basically audit their process and say, look, you're spending too much money here, and we want to know where it's going. Well, they come back with a whole bunch of equipment. They've gone out to get these parts that they need to send the signal back, and he's going over it with like a fine-tooth comb. He has a funny name. I think his name is like Mr. Yellowfeather, and he's going through all these receipts and everything. He's not happy, and he's complaining about they had to spend $75 on a part. And they said, well, it's made out of pure platinum. It has diamond in the center, and we need it. It's like, platinum, diamonds, you guys are going way over budget. And they go ahead and send the return signal, and for a while it seems like nobody's going to respond. Then quite suddenly, the guys in the observation room see a gigantic spacecraft hovering right over the lab, and this is like the worst model kit you've ever seen. It looks like it was literally cobbled together from old pots and pans. Worse than like a little kid's space chefs that's made out of old egg crates and, dishwasher bottles. That kind of level of effect. But anyway, it hovers over the lab, and it literally transports the entire building, Project Startup, up into the spacecraft. And now everybody's freaking out. The director says, "Oh, it must have blown up, and those poor people, they were all killed." He said, "No, you don't understand. It wasn't." The two guys from the observatory said it wasn't blown up. It was taken up into a spaceship. And he says, "Oh, sure it was. How much you've been drinking?" The typical kind of thing that somebody would say if you said something like that. And meanwhile, they on the spacecraft, they're trying to figure out where they're going, and they have artificial gravity. They can breathe. Someone has obviously gone to quite a lot of trouble to make this comfortable for them. There's no, they're not hit by any micrometeorites, so obviously there's a force field around the spacecraft, and they end up going to this asteroid, to a much larger space station. The spacecraft lands, and they get out, and they're met by a very strange sort of cone-shaped robot that is covered with what look like solar panels. It doesn't have any hands, it doesn't have a mouth, it can't speak, but it makes beeping noise. It has antennae, and 4 of these antennae can be used to point at things when it wants them to go somewhere. It leads them down a couple of different corridors, and one of them makes a casual comment that she's hungry. It has this weird thing on the wall. It looks like a sculpture. There's black and white cube spaces. It points to one of them. Simon Oates opens it, and there's a pink box inside. But he can't open the box. He can't figure it out. He realizes there's a part on top that comes off. And another of the scientists figures out it's magnetic. It's a magnetic opener for the lock, and he runs it along the box until finally he can open the lid. And inside is food. It's strange looking, but apparently it tastes really good. It looks like kind of marshmallow peeps, sort of, in green and brown, with sprinkles on them. And they're all eating this and go, "Oh, this is really delicious." And then the robot takes them someplace else. It takes them into another room that has a sort of a strange, semi-transparent projector of some sort in the wall. And they're not sure if it's a weapon. They don't know what it is. And suddenly they see a very horrible-looking alien creature. It's got one arm with a tentacle with a claw on it. And it's got a mouth full of red, maw with lots of teeth. It's only got one eye, and its body is basically just a blackened stalk. And they have to decide whether they're going to try. There's a weapon of some sort that's kind of a club, and one of them picks up the weapon. He's going to hit the thing with it, and then the girl, Ms. Lund, played by Zena Marshall, says, "No, wait a minute. Why don't we try to talk to it, and before we be violent?" And then she offers it one of these cookies, and it takes it, and then it vanishes. And they realize, then the projector turns off, and they realize it was just an illusion, another test. And for passing that test, again, there's another one of these black and white sculpture-looking things on the wall, and the robot points at another cubicle, and Simon Oates opens it, and inside is what looks like a laser gun. He's wondering, why did they give us a weapon if we just avoided using violence to pass this next test? They don't know yet. And then they're taken to a control room where they can look out. There's a second deck, and they can look out over the asteroid and see where they are. They see there's a sort of a strange V-shaped formation of something headed towards another object on a kind of a glass display, and they don't know what that is. And they think it might be a representation of the space station, something coming towards it in a sort of a V pattern. And they leave that room, and then they're guided into a final chamber, and this is where we finally meet the alien, only it's dead. And it has been dead for a long time. It's just a skeleton with a green skull, and it had sort of a skull cap on that had wires attached to it. And there's also a strange black box with a metal sort of a cone in it. And we had seen a previous sequence where Simon Oates explained that when he was a boy, his father was an archaeologist and took him on a dig in France. And they found some Mayan ruins, but they also found a strange cone, with a box with a cube with one of these cones on it, a metal cone. And he thought, oh, this must be something recent. This isn't ancient, And he gave it to the boy, and he took it back to his room, and he accidentally dropped it, and it broke open. and inside were these green glowing crystals. And he took one of them and held it in his hand while he fell asleep, and he had a very strange dream that he was on a bizarre planet that had 2 moons. It was all sort of like bombed looking. It was a very devastated looking landscape, and there was someone there who was in trouble, and he had to find that person. And then he woke up and he painted that scene and wrote his name on it. And that painting we saw in Project Stortok up on the wall. So they find this dead alien with this sort of strange skull cap and another one of these cones and the cubes, and they can't figure out what it is. There's also a round, sort of a platform, raised platform in the middle of the room. And while they're exploring the room, Simon Oates accidentally knocks Zena Marshall onto this platform, and there's a puff, and she disappears. And they're like, "What happened? Where'd she go?" And they're trying to figure this out, and Simon Oates figures this is a matter transporter of some sort of teleport device, and he says, "I got to go save her." And he takes the gun that they were given, and he steps on the platform and ends up on this planet that he had seen in his dream. And meanwhile, Zena Marshall, when she first appears, that you see all these green-faced humanoid aliens, but they're very primitive and savage, and they have these like gigantic silver arrows that they throw at people. And they take her, and they're going to sacrifice her on what looks like a sacrificial table. And this guy has a big knife. He's going to stab her. Simon Oates, appears just in the nick of time, and he's got the laser gun. He doesn't kill anybody with it. He just fires it in the air, and it frightens them, and it frightens them away. And then he grabs her back and brings her back onto the platform, and they end up back on the spaceship. Now they figure out how that works, and they have to figure out what's going on with these, the planet and the aliens and the cubes. And Simon Oates figures out that these skull caps that have wires attached to them attach to the cube, to the cone inside the cube. And he attaches it, and all of a sudden he's talking in the voice of an alien. And it's telling them, we're intelligent, but our species was wiped out by a species that we just call the enemy. And he said, this is what their spaceships look like, and it shows you an image of their spaceships, which again look very cheesy and very cheap models. But he says, we constructed this series of bases to protect known civilizations from the enemy, and we think yours is one of them, and that the enemy is heading towards it, and you have to figure out how to stop them. And he said the secret is in the cubes. Look in the cubes. They'll tell you how to stop them. Well, there are hundreds of these cubes, and they have to figure out, oh my God, there are 2 more of the skull caps, one which Zena Marshall found on the planet, and there was another one in the control room with the dead pilot with the green skull. And they take these skull caps, and they're going through each one of these cubes, they each hold knowledge, and they can't find the right ones. And the robot comes back with a cube for each one of them that gives them the knowledge that they need. It turns out that the space station can do 2 things. It can move by itself. It's got a motor, so it can fly, and 2, it has a defensive system. It's got a missile system that they can use to fire at the enemy spacecraft and destroy them. Well, they destroy a couple of them very quickly, but then the enemy is out of range, and they have to actually maneuver the space station into space to get close enough to destroy the ships. They destroy a couple more of them. They're firing back. They have laser weapons, and the space station is damaged somewhat. It also intercepts and destroys a couple of their missiles, so they have to use more. They have to get in closer, and they're getting into a very dangerous situation. And meanwhile, throughout this, Charles Hawtrey is doesn't know what to make of it. The tea lady is just saying, "Oh, have some more tea. You'll all be fine." I loved that character. I thought that was great having that they had a tea lady along with them on this intergalactic battle. They fight the enemy spaceships, and they destroy all of them. And one of them actually crashes into the space station. They're going to take the spacecraft that brought them there back, but they can't now because it's destroyed as well by the crash of the enemy spacecraft, and they have to get out. And so Simon Oates has figured out how to reconfigure the matter transmitter and take them back to Earth. And they show up back in France at the dig where his father found the original alien cube. Now, none of them. There's a gendarme who's like chasing away. It's a private area, a security area. There's a gendarme chasing little children away who are like dressed up as spacemen. They actually scare them for a moment, and then he chases them away. Basically says, know enough French. And he says, you kids get out of here, basically, and it's illegal for you to be here. And then he talks in English to the other people and says, how did you arrive here? This is an off-limits area. He says, well, we came from somewhere else, from another planet. He says, oh yeah, let me see your passports. And of course, none of them have their passports. He says, okay, no passports, you're all under arrest. But they're happy just to be back on Earth, and that's kind of the way it ends. A little bit silly. The special effects are absolutely grade Z, like something out of a really bad Doctor Who or Blake 7 episode. But for 1967, they're really not that bad. The script is very interesting. It's kind of an interesting story, and I do not think it deserves the really awful reputation that it has. I thought it was actually quite entertaining.